I'm Ben Ryman, and this is Behavior Speak.
So the analogy that I love to use is you can get a great cupcake maker. And if you tell them to make 6 cupcakes, grade A, amazing. Now tell that person to make 200 cupcakes. And they might be able to do it, but now it stretches them. I mean, can they even make it in the kitchen that they're using? Now tell that person to make 1,000 cupcakes. And that person is the same cupcake maker who knows how to make cupcakes at 1,000 cupcakes is lost. They can't even use their kitchen, and then they start to drown. And that happened to me when my clinic grew, and that happens to a lot of clinic owners. So I do my part in at least helping them show that now your job is the system. And the ones who are able to understand that, we have great relationships. We still talk and share war stories. And then some people who are not ready yet, I wish them the best, and hopefully that they find a path that works for them. I do think there's formulas out there that we need to put together. There is a formula for racism. It's not like this thing just happens, right? There's environments. Lack of access to people who don't look like you, groupthink, education levels, depending. And I think if we looked at it more as a mathematical formula, we'd actually find a way to get better at it. We just have to kind of get away from the it is all your fault. Now, people have accountability. I am not excusing behavior. Some people suck and they need to be accounted for. But if we really want to, if you really want to change the world and change the systems, you need to understand why it exists. So I think that is just a fun thought project. What is the formula of racism? What's the formula of running a successful company? So those are the things that I work on in between doing the projects. And I think that's why I chose this path is I kind of have this thing here that I can kind of chew on, have great conversations like this, just to get a little bit better understanding of what that looks like.
Welcome back to Behavior Speak. I'm your host, Ben Ryman. Today's conversation is one I think every behavior analyst, clinical leader, and organization owner needs to hear. I'm joined by Michael Conteh, former clinician, founder, CEO, and now fractional consultant and executive coach, who brings a systems lens to the challenges we face in ABA. We get into why so many of our struggles aren't about client behavior, but about the systems we operate in. We talk about burnout, retention, scaling clinics, leadership mistakes, and what it really takes to build organizations that actually work. If you've ever felt like things are harder than they should be, this episode is going to hit home. Let's get into it. Michael Conteh, welcome to Behavior Speak.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ben.
Let's kind of just get into, you've had a lot of roles. You moved from clinician to CEO to consultant. What's the through line here?
Through line is curiosity. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, so I just happened to get into the field as it started to explode. So it was right around 2000, actually 1999. That's when I first started in the field. It has changed so much, positive, some maybe for the worse. But even back in that day, there were so few BCBAs. And so I remember the early days when just I was a therapist, people had to fly BCBAs into Houston, Texas, go out, they would do a weekend training, and then they would leave. And then the parents had to hire all their folks. So just a completely different world and landscape than where we are now. But curiosity got me into first autism and just kind of what is it, especially around that time, there was just so much different competing ideas on what it was, let alone the treatment piece. And that led me into starting my own company. And so just timing is helpful. So I think the curiosity through line got me to start a company, which I eventually sold. And then now in this chapter, which life is lived in chapters, my curiosity has led me to do things like help parents and just coach parents and help them through their journey. And then now essentially as a fractional ABA consultant is going in and just helping companies solve a lot of their frictions. Many of these frictions are common in our ABA world. So yes, curiosity has been the through line that has just led me on some interesting paths.
And so when did you realize the problem wasn't the client so much as the system?
Probably when the company started to scale. So ultimately, it's a system, my opinion. When you're doing a one-on-one model, human models scale very poorly. And even if you think outside of the ABA world, how many one-on-one models that really hit, 3,000? Because there's just too much complexity when one human who needs to grow, meaning the staff, has to help another young human who needs to grow through the disability. And they're also being coached by one human, the BCBA, who is most likely their first time leading people. That three-decker sandwich of complex itself creates chaos. And I think for me as a young owner, it drove me nuts because it's kind of right, I know how to help this person. I can help the BCBA. I know how to help each person individually. But when you stack all three together, just so much complexity. So first it was anger, first it was frustration. Then I started to realize this is what happens with systems. When systems scales, it shows all the potential gaps. So I think it changed my perspective. I like now because I'm on the other side of the fence. I've been in, had my company for 13 years, got relatively large. I had 3 locations. And then now that I'm outside, I've decompressed all the energy from the experience. I like talking with other owners and just helping them know that they're not going crazy, that this is not your particular fault, but that is just recognizing systems are complicated. So I like trying to hopefully take the weight off of people, especially through the journey that I went through.
Yeah. A lot of BCBAs are trained to think clinically, not systemically, not about leadership. There's so many, kind of as you mentioned, young, just wrote their exam, just passed the test. Clinical directors, some of them are new company owners. Where do most ABA organizations kind of break down at that systems level?
The biggest one ultimately is people need to see their success in the company through the roles that it has. So I like to think of it as a company owner, you're essentially writing a story. And you have to allow that therapist, RBT, BCBA to see what role they play in the story and how to advance. So I'm a big fan of the first 90 days. First 90 days with clients, the first 90 days with staff, you have benchmarks. I would love that in the first 90 days, someone who actually doesn't, they're new to ABA going in, they need to fall in love with the science to put up with all the frictions of working with kids, working with complicated staff. And I think to me, that's where the ball first gets dropped. Anecdotal, but I had over close to 1,000 staff throughout the 13 years. So I'm looking for patterns, clusters of things that make sense. And a common theme you'll see with the top 20%. I'm a big fan of, we spend so much time on the bottom 20%, what's going wrong. I would argue we should really understand what went well with the top, quote unquote, 20% and look for patterns. But a lot of times when you would ask them, hey, why did you stay? And a lot of it was they realized they could actually make impact with the child. They did an intervention, they did an extinction procedure, and it worked. That was internal drive that wanted them to know about ABA. And from then, they have most of the ways to put up with hard days, inconsistency. But if your staff can't see how they're making progress with a child early on, they're lost. And I mean, it's hard already as it is when you love it. If you don't understand what you're doing and then it's all this crap on top of you, you're really running for the exits as soon as possible. So to me, that explains why the retention rates are awful. They're not even poor, that they're awful. Love of the science and then love of other things. But to me, love of the science is a great start.
Yeah. That's something I grapple with at our company because the type of work we do is not sort of your typical, BCBA, RBT clinic kind of work where I get brand new right out of their master's degree students looking for BCBA supervision, but our cases are ridiculously complex, a lot of mental health issues, a lot of stuff that's way outside of everyone's scope, even my own. And I find that to be a tough barrier to sort of get them to fall in love with the kind of work that is burning out some of the long-term folks.
Yeah. Yeah. I was fortunate before I started my company, I worked 1 year residential. And so the kids who couldn't stay at home because unfortunately they hurt themselves, hurt somebody, or destroyed a whole bunch of property. And you're correct. That is a slightly pressure packed, right? And it's just more condensed because go back to complexity of systems. It's the person you're helping has multiple layers of complexity, whether it's biological, neurological. So it adds more layers. What it does though, I think it allows you in some ways is where does the fundamentals of behavior analysis ring so true that they can actually help through most, not all, but most of the complexities. So I know for my company, which we had 2 to 14 in general, and then we went younger over time. I loved, because these kids were younger, to me, we wanted all the staff to learn imitation skills. It's all roads that go through imitation in some way, shape, or form. So I think that fundamental really helped. I think my curiosity for your complexity is there a through line where most of the clients need? And maybe through that through line, could there be a way to find their dopamine or
Yeah.
reinforcement through the
Yeah.
process?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is more the relationship with the parents and sort of stepping into this role of, almost social worker type, counselor type. And so it's pairing. It's developing those pairing skills with parents and staff and folks and just being that listening ear in the beginning to sort of get some buy-in for really potentially some basic interventions, because a lot of the folks we're serving it's restricted practices is kind of where we're at, and trying to sort of get folks out of this funk of restriction and back into quality of life.
I love that you work with parents. I think the one thing when you're running a clinic, there are just so many things to worry about. Parents will almost never be in the top 3, maybe even in the top 5. So it wasn't until after I sold my company, parents will always be the key because it's just ABCs. They end up controlling the environment in many cases, or at least have influence over the environment. This is where I know that, of course, to get your certification, you have to follow all the things, through the task list. But I really wish that BCBAs practice listening skills, being able to listen to connect. So I joke a little bit. I don't know if it's a joke, but you know, when a BCBA, all you do is tell people do all the time, do this information, do this, just listen to me. I think it creates a knowledge gap of really listening to what the needs are. And I think a good to great behavior analysis realizes I am co-creating with the people who will actually have to take care of this kid the day that I'm gone. And I never want to feel like I am the only way to make this work, because now it creates this disempowerment. The parent has to hope I know what I'm doing. That I don't think that allows for the long-term success of not only that client, but of course the family. So I think a great BCBA turns into a good listener. And I mean, you have lots of ideas, but it's, hey, what do we think about? What experiment would you like to try? I think is a great way so that the parent starts to feel more empowered. So I guess really what are we shaping? We're shaping parent empowerment, that they realize I can make some improvements with my kiddo. I'm starting to listen to my kiddo and seeing the behaviors and the sensory issues. So I think that would be a helpful tool for anyone to use that as a way to work with the parent versus talk at the parent.
Do you have a certification with the International Behavior Analysis Organization, the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or are certified through your region's Behavior Analyst Credentialing Board? You can earn continuing education units for this episode by going to www.behaviorspeak.com and clicking on CEUs. First secret word is microscope. Yeah. Well, I think parents often have the solutions already. They've probably implemented them in some other context where they're not seeing those challenges in place. I just finished publishing an episode today on motivational interviewing for behavior analysts and kind of all the pieces in there. And that's, there's so many skills that behavior analysts aren't taught in graduate school that they're really missing out on. And it sounds like That's a lot of the work you do.
Yeah. Listening is one. The one I would really like is I understand we are behavior analysts, but if we really zoomed out, it'd be great if we knew more about neurology and the actual brain chemistry. Because really what we're doing is we're moving brain chemicals. It's the reinforcement is the dopamine of, hey, this is coming, or the cortisol of the kid doesn't know what's taking next. I think by seeing it through that lens, I think it changes us a little bit and it makes us more aware of how biology really is what's driving the bus, and that behavior kind of helps to steer. If a kid or client's only sleeping 3 hours a night, or if they have a poor nutrition, those things are going to impact their behavior because it would do it for us too. So I love behavior analysis. I love the science of it. I think it is one lens of a bigger picture. And sometimes BCBAs get so stuck on it's only this, everything's attention. I think they just really miss out on the simplicity of a good night's sleep and some non-contingent reinforcement, what that can do for folks.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think I read kind of in one of your posts about this microscope versus telescope idea. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, yes. And so I'm a behavior analyst, spent most of my career. I do have a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, which is essentially systems. This is the best way to think of it. So to me, the telescope is if you really zoom out at a problem, we a lot of times like to assign that a problem is a person's fault. That's the thing. Oh, they didn't follow my rules. But if you really zoom out with a telescope, you'll recognize that problems can either be systems problems, process problems, or people problems. And before you go down to the people, I think it's looking at the system. So the system is, did we properly train them? And I don't like I told them once they should have gotten it. Humans are poor audio listeners. If you stack up all the mammals, all of us, we're like at literally the end of the spectrum. And so I do find that, well, I told them once this should be law, it just doesn't work. So the system is, did we properly train them? What did that look like? The process is how. Was someone qualified to do the training? Were the materials going well? Because when you do it that way, once you start looking that things are not people's faults, you actually improve the system. And the system's just the environment, right? What is the system? But really where the environment lives, or maybe I guess the rules of the environment, probably a better way to say it. Now you're actually changing things that can make a difference versus just it's their fault, they will figure it out. So to me, that's a telescope. And especially we are single case design creatures in our field. I think it's hard to zoom out. We're just kind of stuck on sometimes that one person or one issue. And then the microscope to me is the behavior analysis. And to me, great behavior analysis is just really great definitions that allow great experiments. And so it's the person's relationship with perfection, recognizing that they get mad that they did it 80% when they actually be doing cartwheels.
Right.
If someone could do something 80% as good as you should be just ecstatic. But for some people, that's not good enough. So that's the microscope. It's recognizing that I like to think of them as algorithms in our heads, those behavioral thoughts that lead us to destructive patterns. So it's changing those algorithms. Relationships with perfection, relationships with delegation. I gave it to them, they messed it up, I have to do it. Well, that algorithm is superhero syndrome. I am the only one that can do it.
Yeah.
No one else can. To me, that's just it's poison to a BCBA, especially when they already have so much control. So I like being able to use both. For some people, they need more microscope, changing the thoughts in their head to build better, evolving thoughts. Sometimes it's zooming out. And I find that in using a combination, you can not necessarily solve every problem, but you can create a good definition and experiment. And that's what gets people motivated. I think for a lot of folks, things are just too abstract. Like perfection is an abstract concept. And we could pull it down to something that feels more finite and doable. Now they try and experiment on how to make that improve. And that's where people start to find their own evolution. A good BCBA should be able to do their own self-intervention. I think is a hallmark of someone that realizes they can internalize the science and then grow and evolve from it.
Yeah, the need for perfection is huge, and the sort of idea that we have to get to the 100% before we move into the next skill, into the next skill, into the next skill. What are some of the dangers in kind of being stuck in that way? Because I think there's a lot of behavior analysts that would Michael, what are you saying? You don't want us to work to the best of our ability. You don't want our clients to be safe. You don't want our clients to be successful. You want to quit at 80. What's sort of the response to that?
My response is humans are not perfection creatures. Perfection should never be part of any system that humans are involved in. And I would say that sometimes some people can use perfection as a safety mechanism. It protects them because if someone can't do it as good as them, it's a protectionary area. And then on top of that, I think the quest for perfection starts to outbalance the need of the human in front of you. Most of the clients we work with them because there are gaps bigger than quote unquote normal. And so why would we try to put them in a near perfection system when they have huge gaps that get in the way? I'm all about acquisition, stability, and momentum. Let's let this client understand the principle of contingent access instead of, drill and kill so that they know what a book is. I'd much rather a client recognize if I actually participate well, I get reinforced for my effort, not just touch these things, they have to be right. So I think that's where we get lost in the sauce, that we're looking for this perfect system, that this person has to do all these things correct. Instead of saying, let's client acquire contingent access. Now let's take that and let's stabilize that in the environment. And then through that, I don't have to have 80 trials to teach the apple. If the kid knows contingent access, I present it clearly, I might cut my acquisition trials in half. Because they just go, oh, this is Apple. I touch it. I get something that's rewarding. So to me, that's a much healthier path. The client's less frustrated. They've not been drilled to death. And then more likely, they're not bored to death in the process. And it goes back to, it's not most BCBA's fault that, they've been put in the ringer. They've all been doing this programming. They don't have to think outside the box because they just need to kind of get the work done. But I think once you recognize that box is actually really small, there's a lot of ways to help a child be successful.
You've stepped into organizations not as a full-time executive, fractionally. What is fractional leadership in real terms?
Fractional leadership is like having an uncle spend the weekend with you and help you clean your garage. And so what happens is a company will call and just pretty much what fire is taking place in their systems. A lot of times it's training retention cycle systems. And so what we'll go in is first, let's analyze. Let's analyze how messy this garage is. Do you have a system? Yes or no? What parts are working well and where are the gaps? And then my role is to, once we analyze where the gaps are, then I become part project manager, part executive coach. So as a project manager, the project is a great example. Most companies don't have offboarding. It doesn't even exist. And you're losing data and knowledge that flows right out the door. Now, that staff may not have been a fit, but you should know why. Why did they feel that this wasn't for them? Because then it allows you to go back and work on the system to make that better. But a lot of folks are like, oh, you're out and, the owner gets butthurt. I used to be an owner. Oh, well, if they want to leave me, fine. But you don't know why. You're not improving the process. So there's a big gap. And so we identify, look, there's a big gap at offboarding. Okay, what do we want to do? So that's where we all collaborate together and create, well, I would like that there is an exit interview, no matter what. They can cuss us out. We need to collect the information, quote unquote, collect the data. Now I become the project manager. So, okay, these are what you guys want to get done. Who's working on what? Okay, you're doing this, you're doing this. And now as a project manager, here's our goals. Here's your weekly email. Let's keep the momentum going. Because as soon as we do it, life still happens, especially at big clinics. And it's like, no. we're here to fix this.
Hmm.
Project manager had to go and work with the different levels, make sure they get done. And then now once the place is put in, then it's make sure that there's a training behind it to keep that system stable. And sometimes that could be very short, depends on what we're fixing. That's what a fractional person does. They go in, we isolate a specific issue that needs to be worked on, create the tools and the means to get it done, and then motivate, nudge people to get it done. I think to me, that's a good success.
Hmm.
And then uncle leaves and goes about his way. And hopefully they've learned some skills so that it can fix more of their systems. Or if they need more help, they know where to find me.
Oh.
But once that's done, the company will have some skills that now they know how to understand their problems a little better. So for some folks, they no longer need help from that standpoint. And of course, if there's bigger struggles or needs, that the people know where to find me, if they still have gaps within their systems. But the common ones are the ones we all recognize. It is the employee life cycle in total, right? How to find folks, train folks, motivate folks, and offboard. Sometimes with programming can go crazy. It is crazy what happens with programming. So sometimes program stability, and then other ways to motivate. But most of them tend to be quote unquote the people issues in these one-on-one therapy models.
And so do you think fractional leadership is a smarter model for ABA now, or?
It works for me
Hmm.
because it allows me the freedom to pick and choose. I think it will work for ABA companies because it's hard to find someone who has the bandwidth to finish the project. So most owners actually know what's wrong. They're like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. They don't have the bandwidth to fix it. And I think that's where an outside person can just kind of come in because I don't know anybody. To me, it's no one's fault. I
Yeah.
don't I have no incentive. I have no dog in, well, this person should have done it or this department. My job is to fix. So I think that allows a fresh set of eyes just to come in and be very directive, but then also have the knowledge to know what to do. It's okay, here's the issue. Well, actually, let's go about the part of fixing it. So I do think, especially as companies start to scale, because this is really a scaling issue. If you're normally under 12 clients, you don't really have too much of these issues. When you start to get to 25, and then especially once you get past 50, and then once you're over 150, the chaos, it just starts. And it just continues throughout. So I do think for the companies that if the goal is really to capture quote unquote market share and outlast your competition, people with the best systems will win. To me, it's as simple as that, within reason. And I think the companies that really want to win will do their best to understand systems. And then when they need assistance, know how to get access to people that can help them improve the specific systems that they want.
How do you create leverage fast when you don't kind of own the system as someone kind of just coming in and leaving?
To me, the same way how you connect with a young child who can't speak, everything is still connection. So my first role is I need to find the stakeholders who really move the company. Depends on the size. If it happens to be the owner, the original owner, I connect because I've sat in that shoes. So my first job is not just saying I understand, we can share war stories, we can discuss, but I want them to know that I am here to help their quote unquote baby. I'm not here to critique. I'm not talking about how the baby is. I'm actually here because I would have loved to have someone help me in the process. Whether it's an owner, I want to connect that way. If it's a larger company, I still think there's lots of connection on who's really moving the needle. So I tend to work with a combination of HR and a clinical lead and ABA, and almost all of them want to do a better job. So I think it's saying, I am here to actually help you guys fulfill your goal. And then through that process, that should hopefully build enough trust that they will let their guard down to talk about what's wrong. Because there is that kind of the thing, and I like using the baby reference. It's like, sometimes the baby's kind of sick right now and is pooping all over the place. And it's hard for people to kind of be comfortable admitting that to quote unquote a stranger. So I like to just go in and say, I'm here to change diapers. What can we do to help? And I find in most cases, that allows us to actually get to solving the true issue versus the blame game or anything else that's happening.
Love that. And what do you look for in the first 30 days?
It depends on the system, but ultimately the key word is momentum. We have to be moving in a direction. In the ABA world, it's trend lines. It's not just one bad day. It's can we get a trend line moving in the right direction? So retention, for instance, once we work on it, and it depends on the size of the company, but once we have the new experiment, now it's saying in 30 days, is there a trend line that says that we now get staff to show up for interviews 20 to 30% more, which is crazy. That used to never be a problem. And now people have problems with people showing up. And so when you're able to really have a good intervention, have some sort of measurement in the 30 days, and then reevaluate. So even when a lot of the projects are done, I'm more than happy to pop back in, even just for a one-day training, and say, let's look at the project. These 6 things have gone great. These are perfect. These 2 things have more friction. What are some small things that can be fixed? They're easy to fix. They can fix them on their own. If they need some assistance, that's up to them. I always think whether you're a person, when someone can see their progress, that is actually when motivation begins, is that piece. And so I just have to do it from a company or system level of showing the retention rate going up helps every person in the system say, please keep doing what you're doing. Don't disrupt the system as it's still in its infancy.
Do you find founders resist this? Does ego get in the way?
I love my people. I am one of them. I was one of those stubborn people who never wanted to listen. Yes, I do find that people really are defensive about their baby. And I used to be that way too, right? No one will know this baby more than me, which is correct. But that's why I got to get them to think about systems. People are thinking that this is the only baby of ABA that's existed. It's just a baby.
Yeah.
It's like saying only I can change my baby's diaper. No one else knows how to. It's like it's a diaper and it's poo. So I really try to go in, and there's times I do that early interview. They're so resistant to want to change, kind of hardened, and maybe the better word is jaded. Because I went through that process. It is hard to be an owner, so I kind of start with that. Like I know this is hard. They at least understand. If they at least allow me to babysit or at least allow me a crack in the door, I am comfortable. But I'll get some folks and we'll barely make a suggestion. We're talking for 10 minutes. Like, oh, that won't work. And this automatically shooting down. You have to be receptive enough to want to evolve. Because really, we're talking about evolution. We really like what is happening. It's the evolution of the person, especially an owner, because they have to do something different than what they were doing before, especially when it scales. And I think that's where owners get stuck. It's this used to always work. It doesn't work now. It's someone's fault. And I go in and say, it doesn't work just because it's a scaling issue. So the analogy that I love to use is you can get a great cupcake maker. And if you tell them to make 6 cupcakes, grade A, amazing. Now tell that person to make 200 cupcakes. And they might be able to do it, but now it stretches them. I mean, can they even make it in the kitchen that they're using? Now tell that person to make 1,000 cupcakes. And that person is the same cupcake maker who knows how to make cupcakes at 1,000 cupcakes is lost. They can't even use their kitchen, and then they start to drown. And that happened to me when my clinic grew, and that happens to a lot of clinic owners. So I do my part in at least helping them show that now your job is the system. And the ones who are able to understand that, we have great relationships. We still talk and share war stories. And then some people who are not ready yet, I wish them the best, and hopefully that they find a path that works for them.
And so what do you think the biggest leadership mistake you see founders making?
Their lack of evolution. I learned, I was around when all the states started to pass all the insurances, and all the clinics just grew like wildfire when all the clinics started to grow. And I recognized that the clinic was outgrowing me. I started to not have the skills Told people not a problem. When I got to 20, when I started getting around that 30 part, I'm like, I can't do one-on-ones with everyone anymore. The skills where my strength is connection, one-on-ones. Well, I can't literally meet with all of them. When I got to 70, I just have to remember everyone's name. Like, let alone connection, know about their cat. It's like, I got to remember your first name and your last name and what position that you have. And so if you fail to evolve, and I can see the reasoning. The original person who started this company, they were successful to start it, but that's just the beginning of the journey. It's like, and I think if the owner is unwilling to evolve or doesn't spend time to evolve. So the best thing I did is when my company, I had it for 13 years, so maybe around year 8, 9, or 10, because a little bit of burnout and stress. That's actually when I got into Lean Six Sigma, because I'm like, I got to find a different way. And I found something that worked for me on systems. So if you're not spending any time learning how to evolve, your company will outgrow you. And you will never have enough energy to sustain the company. Small company, your energy can handle it, but you recognize really fast that it can't. And then you have to make a choice. And some people get jaded. I went through that phase. And then some people are willing to evolve, let other people help, right? That's the other piece. Let other people in. I think those are the owners that remain successful and keep their sanity in the process.
You mentioned Lean Six Sigma. What is Lean Six Sigma and what kind of clicked for you when you found it?
So I was already a behavior analyst first. So essentially Lean Six Sigma is for people that are a little older, in the 70s and 80s, all the cars still had lots of issues, right? The brakes wouldn't work sometimes, all these failures that would happen because a car is just lots of different parts. And so what Lean Six Sigma is essentially is, how do we reduce error in a system? How do we make sure that the brakes work routinely? And let's say a part fails, one small piece fails. How do we make sure that that person doesn't now die and crash into a ditch? And so instead of just, in the old days, you just fix the brakes and then people would worry about everything else. Lean Six Sigma says, let's look at the entire vehicle and let's make sure that the system is constantly evolving in all its key areas to eliminate all the things that get in our way. So eliminating waste, meaning, can we make this process that is 12 steps? Can we make it 6 steps that makes it work better? Eliminates the common errors. This always keeps breaking. Instead of just being mad and hitting the machine, let's look at what is actually failing within it to replace it. So I think I love that philosophy because it actually gave me a way to work on things. And then over time, systems or days start to get better because, like, for example, in clinics, it used to drive me nuts that at the end of the day, the clinic was just a mess. The toys are all over the place. And it's so frustrating because the next day it's like Humpty Dumpty. It's kind of hard to step into a clinic and you're stepping on toys. So we have to find a better way to do it. And so, of course, you want to encourage. There were sometimes consequences, right? You just can't leave a place messy and just run out the door. But what changed it is we actually took, for each wall, we took a detailed picture of what the place looked like.
Nice.
And we put it, 4 of them on each part. And that greatly increased the probability of getting it done. So here we are thinking people just suck. They don't want to listen. But the truth is, they didn't know how to put it together in the correct way. So once we made that change, now they're pretty much putting a puzzle together. They could do that with the kiddo, with the activity. And that was the first one where the light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, crap, I'm sitting there being mad at folks. And all I had to do was literally take a picture, but it's a different mindset. We worked on it until we recognized where the error was. It was lack of knowledge, ultimately. And once we changed that, now it's not an issue to put it together. So to me, that's what Six Sigma does. It gets you to really look at the issue in a way that is different than just quote unquote ABA, let's change this behavior. This is, to me, a better holistic way to look at an issue.
And so you have a black belt in Lean Six Sigma. What's that mean?
It's not karate or kung fu. I don't have to break the board. But essentially, there's technically, I think, 4 levels in Six Sigma. So like white belt is just knowledge. Yellow belt is small implementation. Green belt, where you start to get something that's worth value, that you can carry out a project. So a project is given to you, you can carry it out. So almost think of it as let's call it an RBT, but they're able to carry out the function. A Six Sigma black belt can diagnose the issue, set up the project, and then measure the project and complete it. So those are kind of the four-ish steps, where a green belt really just is measuring and completing. That's what a black belt can do.
Okay, right on. And you talk about finding these sort of common inefficiencies. What's a super common inefficiency in ABA that drives you nuts?
I mean, the employee life cycle is always the big one, but outside of that, the scheduling. Scheduling is chaos. Scheduling is organized chaos. And now some of it's outside of your control in theory, right? Because this is why systems have complexity. If it's just two people, to fix a schedule a little easier. But you have a staff that needs to show up, you need a kid that needs to show up, and they all have their complexity and what's happening on that day. So I really think just getting a better understanding of the schedule. So I look at that issue and say, I need to spend time with the parents so they understand the importance of showing up and their role in us working together. There's a whole motivator. If the parent doesn't feel motivated to bring their kid in, then that's the cause of the schedule issue. So I'm thinking of, I need to work with the parent so that they see the progress of the kid. Because I would argue, if a kid is making progress, that parent shows up. They drop their kid off at 8 o'clock on the dot because they see that this can benefit their child. And so I need to, in that first 30 days, let's do a good job with this kiddo. And that parent will start to show up more consistency in more cases. And then on the staff side, I need them to understand, if they want more quote unquote regular hours, it is really contingent on their consistency to provide that great energy for this child. So instead of just saying scheduling sucks, I'm actually looking at the two root causes and then really trying to find the best ways to improve both. But that is definitely one that, because it drives staff nuts and they don't like change. They don't want to work with this kiddo. And I think that's a quick way to ruin morale. And once morale is ruined, then people are just running for the exit.
The second secret word is break. Where do you find people tend to push back on this work?
It tends to be people that are resistant to change. And I do think as humans, we're more change resistant. So I think there's normal levels of change resistant, but there's some people that the act of changing feels like an affront to their ideas or what they know is correct. So that's the folks that if they created, so when I go in, if they're the ones who created the training program, and then I look at it and go, it needs to be upgraded, they're going to be the ones trying to defend their idea. And so that's why I shift on, this idea was fantastic. Thank you for creating this program. Let's evolve it together. Can sometimes bring people out of you are doing this against me. My ideas are valid. To me, the dangerous people are people who fall in love with their ideas too much. And I'm an idea person. Ideas are great, but they're just ideas. Other people have ideas too. Other ideas could be great. So that's what I try to soften up. But people that are hardened, that their ideas are their identity, can really be more challenging to motivate and for them to see how evolution can actually benefit them versus doing what they've always been doing.
A lot of people are talking right now about burnout and retention. Is burnout actually a systems failure?
Now is a systems and people failure. In my personal opinion, it's just really hard to invest lots of energy into another human being. You look at all the fields that do it, whether you're a nurse, a doctor, a psychologist, a school teacher, there's a lot of wearing out, especially if there's one-on-one intensity. So I think in and of itself, has a higher probability of burnout, even if the systems are working very well. And I really think people should start with that as the equation of recognizing, at times, you're not going to want to do this. I should tell staff, in the first 90 days, you're going to want to quit. That is a natural process. You have to choose if you want to continue to evolve or not. I think when companies struggle is they try to do this Pollyanna, give them coffee, feed them donuts, that the happiness can distract. But you're not solving the root issue. One-on-one intensive therapy, when done well, is exhausting. If you're actually doing a good job, you will go home tired. And so I think it's to take that and for them to feel the dopamine, the reward of their hard work versus, oh, something's wrong if this feels hard. So I think there needs to be a reality that you give folks. And the people who really do well, they respect that reality versus this Pollyanna stuff, this please stay, here's some more pizza. That pizza's not going to keep someone from deciding to stay or leave a company. They fed me on Friday. So I think, so that ultimately is a system issue. Meaning the system itself has inherent burnout baked into the system. Then on the people side, it goes back to them finding their confidence. Their ability to actually grow is that other piece. And I mean, some of these trainings, it is great that there's online trainings. There's great that there's a lot of ways, but that's one of the things talked about what hasn't changed in 25-ish years. People are still poorly trained in the beginning. It's literally, here, you go do a video to watch this thing. Here's your maybe one day of training, and now here's your kid. You're just asking for trouble. And so this person doesn't have a clue what they're doing. And then they become a malcontent. Now they're getting other people become malcontents. Like you're creating your own issue for not just spending a little bit more time. And yes, you can waste time with people that can still leave no matter what. But if I truly think I have a great product, let's take it from a business standpoint. If I have a great product, I'm going to spend that time in the beginning with these folks because I want them to stay 2 to 6 years. I want them to kind of grow. And I think to me, that's a long-term winning strategy versus the please stay, just doesn't work long-term. So yeah, I think that is a challenge to address the burnout head on and give them tools on day one versus hope and pray that they don't burn out along the way.
You can't self-care your way out of a broken system. Agree or disagree?
I would say that you can't. Can you self-care your way out of a broken system? Not entirely, but you can make yourself more burnout resistant. So, if you're swimming in an ocean, at some point, if you don't get out, you'll drown. So that I get. But if you're more resilient, you learn how to float. So I think you can build enough resiliency in the system where you can last a lot longer. I think that is possible. But just saying, treat yourself after work, no, that is not sustainable.
And if you had 90 days to fix turnover, what would you do? What would you do first?
If I had 90 days to fix turnover, I would spend a lot of time in that first week with new employees. So I like to hire in batches if the company's big enough. And I like batches like cookies. You get to find out. So we actually used to kind of just keep track of each group. Which group turned out, sometimes we would get 90% of people stayed in one batch. And the other one, 10% stayed. Lots of interesting questions of what takes place. So the first thing I would do is help with the interview, right? They could do it, but make sure that someone has a good interview so I could measure people the same. And I love that first 3 days. The first 3 days, you establish who we are as a company, what we expect out of you. And then it goes back to how do you see where you can grow here? And I used to tell folks, and this is where, these people I don't own these people. I tell folks people stay at this company for about 2 to 6 years or more, depends on them. But what we want from folks is that when they come here, they really understand how to motivate people. And so we love when people become either behavior analysts, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, social workers, and we cheer you along your way. As long as you give great effort, as long as you're consistent, we'll do our part to help you grow. That is what I want to see. I want to give every person that fighting chance. that they understand what can happen here. Going back to that story, I'm telling you what the story could look like. Here's the ways that you could be successful in this story. I would start there because there's some folks that they just need to know that this company cares about them and they'll work hard. But a lot of times they get none of that. They just get, here's the kid, here's this boring training. Hope you figure this out. Well, why should I feel invested when there's already too much drama and chaos going on? Why should I invest? So that first 1 to 3 days, I want them crystal clear on where they can end up. Will give a better chance for the people who really want to make it to not just survive, but thrive in that system.
And I love the idea of supporting folks potentially to leave the company, to do what they want after. And some might think of that as sort of, paradoxical. You're going to encourage me. Are you encouraging me to leave, or are you just encouraging me to grow?
I think we do people a disservice that they decide they want to leave. They decide that they've done their time, and then the owner or the company treats them like crap on the way out. And make no mistake, staff are always watching. And I always think there's always alphas, meaning leaders, informal or not, that are within your company. And if one of them decides that they just want to do something else, they want to be a parent, they want to go off and do occupational therapy. If I treat it like it's an affront to me, look what I did for you, you owe me, then that's a monarchy. I don't know. I don't want to be in a monarchy. I want to feel like we did this together. And so by starting with that, it helps that I don't force people to stay longer than they want. They're making choices. And I think choosing people will be happier than people that feel that they're stuck. I have to stay here because I need to make this payment on my car. That's a terrible way to want to need to stay at a company. So by saying it's 2 to 6 years, it's just give them the average. Like here is the spread, here's the range, and then you get to decide the journey. Now some stayed, 13 years, some stayed 9, some stayed 10 throughout the process. But it reinforces that I want you to evolve. You get to decide when this place no longer serves you. But if I invest in you that way, you'll invest in making sure my company doesn't fall apart. When they're in the break room and one therapist is talking smack about the company, you will speak up on your own accord because you feel that we are in this together. That's where people make that mistake. So I'm a big fan. My job is to help you grow, and it's actually your growth that helps the company run. To me, is a healthier way to think about this system.
Thinking about growth, you've scaled and exited a company. What breaks first when organizations grow?
The owner. Easily. The owner breaks. I broke 2.5 times. We got to about 110, almost 120. So, so that part breaks, because, and then I would say the upper middle management. So you also have good people at the top. The diehards are able to grow with you. And I had a great team of executives, love them to death. But then it's like a chasm, a desert of people that are all new at their positions, right? The clinical executive has been a clinician for 3 months. The PCBA has been a PCBA for 2 months. The RBT has been RBT for 2 months. It's blind mice. I used to walk in there and be like, oh, it's blind mice here. And I think that's where there's not enough alphas in the middle to stabilize the tribe. And so what I see happens is sometimes people at different levels start to become the informal alpha of the group. And an alpha is essentially just who do people listen to or who has sway. And it can just be a new employee that comes in and just starts being dogmatic and starting to kind of preach their philosophy on why the owners suck above and why we are right. So it is so vital that you make sure that the chasm between the upper crust and the bottom, that there has to be enough people that are strong enough to maintain that system. And that's where most 8 companies, because there tends to be not enough people, or the retention rate tends to be poor, that there's not enough good people that stay long enough to stabilize those systems.
So can you scale without losing quality?
You can long-term, yes. Short-term, that's systems you lose quality. That's growing a system. Going back to the cupcake example, I think it's recognizing that the system can't degrade far. When you go from 10 to 40, you're going to have a slight degrade in your training system because you might need a trainer. You actually need to get a full trainer to do the job. I think what you want is that the degradation is very small, but then is able to evolve, find its kind of feet in the new system. But yeah, that's the thing about all systems, that they do go through small degradation. You just don't want the system to fall apart where it just feels like it's not working at all.
And so what do you think the biggest lie founders tell themselves when scaling?
That they can do it by themselves, that they have the means to do it. I thought I had the means. And you're good. I am not here to disparage. Running a business is the hardest thing to do. It is, you jump out the parachute, you jump out without a parachute, but it is a math equation. You can have all the money in the world, or you could be living paycheck to paycheck. You just still get 24 hours in a day. And you start to recognize that you cannot build the training system and meet with all the folks and help all the marketing and make that decision. And even just make the decisions. You can have people, but that you have to make the final decision and keep connection with the parent and deal with the 10% squeaky wheels on the parent side, the client side. Oh, and vendors and all the crap that they put on you. Oh, and you got to take care of the finances. You are a finite creature running an infinite system. You will lose that battle 100% of the time. It's honestly just a win question. And so for the folks that I can still do it, and this is even with AI. I wish I had AI. I sold my company 2019. I wouldn't still be in business. I probably would have sold still. So it could do a lot more. You're still a finite creature. I think you just have to recognize if you're just barely doing it now and you're successful, that's actually more detrimental to you. Because at some point, you start to run out of gas. You start struggling with sleeping regularly. I remember when, the emails were like rabbits. I tried to get the email under 20, and just that ping. I got to the point where that ping was just aversive because it's just, what else?
Yeah.
It was going in my head. And I just say, when you're at that point, it's not you. Because I think for me, I internalized it. I am doing something wrong because we have this interpretation that owners are superheroes. They don't sleep. Those are all lies. Those are lies that other people tell or we tell ourselves. I think it's just recognizing I am okay with getting help because I'm being successful. We think help is, I only need help when things are wrong. I would say it's the opposite. When things are going well is when you need help because your system's going to break. The mathematics is coming, and the last thing you want is that it starts to break and now there's no one around to help. To me, that's the lonely feeling. And that's where a lot of owners start to feel that despair on what's happening to their clinic.
And do you get owners and clients that are thinking that way, that are looking for help when things are going well?
Not necessarily. It starts out as something's broken, but I think my role, and I spend a lot of my time coaching. That's probably where I make most of my money now. So I am an executive coach. Had a certification in coaching. I do believe in good certifications. It's saying, I'm here to help you with this issue, but let's talk about how you can evolve more. And then we start talking about the principles that work well for them. And that is one of the principles is, instead of recognizing, oh my goodness, this broke, you start to recognize that, when does this system start to run its course? When does my current training program probably start to have issues? Is that, with the next 20 clients, how many kids actually fit in this clinic that makes sense before I have to think about something else? I think it's giving them the awareness of your systems are just starting to expire, and for you to be proactive. I think that's when they go, oh, okay, it's not me, but I can get ahead of this before this thing really starts to degrade. And then I'm scrambling too much when I could have been helping it grow at a steady pace.
What does BCBA 2.0 look like to you?
A BCBA 2.0 realizes that although we are credentialed as behavior analysts, there are lots of ways to modify behavior. And so we talked earlier, it's just recognizing that brain chemistry is really the ultimate goal. And that could be done in lots of ways. Biology actually is the fastest way to change behavior. And so you're in an environment, you just get a really good, delicious ice cream. That's going to impact your dopamine. Hey, the kid is happy. Well, shocker. It's not that he just became happy, is that the sugar hit his system, the addiction of the sugar popped his dopamine. So the world is good. So I think a BCBA 2.0 doesn't trap themselves into science. I do talks. I need to do more talks out on the road again, but nothing annoys me. I don't know the percentage, but it almost feels like 5 to 50% of the field is just so retentive in this is the only way, everything needs an FBA, and just that just blech. It just annoys me because it's almost like it's a defense mechanism. So BCBA 2.0 recognized biology and neurology is an important piece of the puzzle, not just a side note. And then recognizes that a BCBA has to keep growing. Test is hard. I realized that the failure rate's actually growing, which is a system issue over there. But my goodness, as a BCBA, you need to learn how to listen to folks. You need to learn how to be a leader. And I coach in corporate. Managing people and leading people, it's its own job by itself, regardless of everything else. I think a lot of people just have well, I have the position, you have to listen to me. That's a terrible leader. That I don't want someone that is a do as I say type of person. So BCBA 2.0 actually spends time learning how, and I like to use these words, how to be a kind alpha. To recognize the responsibility that I am actually leading a group of people that I need to care about them if I want them to care about me. And that means I need to reward people, but it also means I need to have hard conversations with them. And so I see folks that they'll do all the happy stuff, but they won't have that hard conversation that a staff is struggling and willing to sit them in a room and say, hey, what's going on? So a kind alpha recognizes I want to be a good leader. If I really want to help the kids, I need to be a good leader to lead a group of folks to help these kiddos. So that's a part of a 2.0. And then if I say there's a third thing is just communicate with other related services. I am fortunate my company had ABA speech and OT together. And we would meet in rooms. And it wasn't ABA runs the ship, here's where we go. It's a saying, what does this kid really need? And for some kiddos, they really needed the influence of the speech more because they had the pieces, they just didn't know how the words to come out of their mouth. And so the speech pathologist kind of at least dictated the communication system for that kiddo that then ABA just followed. And so we would have lots of debate. I like best idea wins. But for ABA people not to understand at least what speech and OT, if you run a clinic, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. OT is fantastic. They have the coolest stuff, but they work on the biology. These sensory systems, especially if you're working with a kid with autism, they have challenges. A good OT can actually help with that. You can't out reinforce a sensory system that's having issues. So a BCBA 2.0 spends time with the OTs and just understands what they does, what they does. Same thing with speech pathology. And there's other related ones too. But to me, that's a BCBA who's evolving versus here, just do this. If you don't do it, it's all your fault.
Michael, when did you actually feel like a leader and not just a BCBA?
For me, I'm a little fortunate that I did leadership before I started the company. So that happened to be an area that I felt more comfortable. Started from the religious standpoint, helping out in church areas and taking activities. Really took off playing basketball. I was a leader of the team. So I am fortunate that those experiences, because it's one thing to say, oh, I had them all, it was experiences. I was allowed to do something, and through that I grew. That made it easier for me to then start that clinic moving forward. But even when I got there, I still had to grow as a leader. And so I had to really change kind of my persona, especially as we started to scale. I joke, but in the early days, because I always want to be me, I want to represent. In the early days of my clinic, I used to wear a basketball jersey and walk around. Because I was of the mindset of I just need to be me, and people liked that and resonated with. But I realized at some point I had to evolve. Then the basketball jersey turned into dress pants. I didn't do the tie. I didn't do the tie, but I recognized that if I want to lead more and more people, I want to feel that I have the ability to do it versus just quote unquote being me. Or I just outgrew that piece. So yeah, so it took more growth, but I think I just have to be more fortunate of the skills I had before I started the clinic.
Where's ABA headed?
ABA right now is like a 15-year-old with like lots of acne, uh, disturbance issues, like all these things taking place. It is an awkward phase in our development. So in the short term, honestly, it is, I don't want to use the word chaos, adjacent to chaos, very challenging because we have people who, I think when I go, what's a sadness of our field? I just imagine how many potential BF Skinners and Brian Awadas that could have been, but they left the field after 4 months and thought ABA sucks. To me, that's going to be one of the biggest travesties of our field, that we didn't really protect enough people to keep this process going. So I feel the field needs to find the best ways to use the science, and that does not have to be autism only. So I love autism. It brought me to the field. I'm passionate about that activity, but it is applied behavior analysis. And we really need more missionaries that do take those ventures, whether it's OBM, whether it's UX design, whether it's these other related fields, and really try to build a stable way for BCBAs to make revenue besides being forced to stay at clinics. There's good clinics, there's bad clinics, and all in between. But I think a lot of BCBAs kind of feel trapped. So it kind of perpetuates a cycle. And this happened to me. I see my owner, they look incompetent, but they're growing. And I'm like, well, I can do that. And so I go out and then I just go do another clinic. I'm tired of all these things. But I actually didn't learn the process of being an owner. I didn't learn the process of being a leader. And then I start to repeat the same issues that my boss did when they had their company. And then now people are disenchanted with my company and then they go out. And so to me, that's just a bad cycle that I feel that we have in our field. And so we need people that just kind of stake claim to lots of territory, because the science is beautiful when it works. We're just distracted by everything else. So that sounded very pessimistic. So that's short-term pessimism, but I do have long-term optimism of the science. Of other things, I'm not quite sure, but this should not be a Western-only science. I'm fortunate I get to travel. So as we speak, I'm in Panama. I spend a lot of time in Latin America. My Spanish is getting better. I want people to take this beautiful science and spread it, just like a missionary would, to the world. I wish more of us wouldn't feel just stuck that we have to do these things in clinics. And I think if enough of us do that, I honestly think the ABA will grow in other areas. We'll start to catch wildfire in other places. To me, that's the hope of the field. In where we are, I'm not quite so sure. How do we separate the science from the revenue creation and what that looks like?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what we've been talking about it's an American conversation. I'm in Canada. It's a little different up here. I've interviewed behavior analysts in over 60 countries, and I've talked to a lot of folks who are quite literally the first behavior analysts in their country. These folks are just starting these systems out and starting, and the idea of scaling is non-existent. What kind of message do you have for, the only behavior analyst in Ethiopia, the first behavior analyst in Belarus in terms of, shaping up systems for the future?
In order to build a system, you have to have a tribe. So the number one thing that you do is keep preaching until you start to build a tribe. And I think it's through that process where people are starting to implement the beautiful part of the science. Once that's there, now you can start to build the system that starts to kind of build, well, how do we get more people into getting excited about ABA? And how do we get people credentialed in other ways outside of the US? So that's my best advice. And then try your best to talk to other folks. You're not alone. And I love analogy. That's why I like the missionary analogy, because that just makes a lot of parallel comparisons. Talk to other missionaries, understand their struggle, because it helps you not to feel that you're the only one that's trying to do this road alone. And so communicate in lots of ways. I love communicating with folks. One of the best things now that I'm kind of in this chapter, this consulting fractional, doing a talk to a school in Nigeria, yeah, it's hard to replace the dopamine I feel of just saying stuff that I would just love to talk about anyway. But see how I'll use the word hungry for the knowledge that they with this big school of folks writing things down. I was fortunate. I've done a talk in South Korea with social workers, did a 2-day talk there. And I just, those are what motivates me now is that. I love the consulting. I love doing those other activities, but nothing will light me up because I love the science and I love helping people and then get to combine them both. So yeah, that is the hope, is just continue to network. And then once you build the tribe, then the system can follow.
The third secret word is resource. If every BCBA listening changed one thing tomorrow, what should it be?
You have to have a way to decompress the madness of that day. I think this is for all of us, regardless. But if you taking work home in here at 100 miles per hour, you will eventually burn out. So, and healthy ways to decompress. Mammals are addiction creatures. You look at almost all mammals, know your addictions, know which things that put you on the wrong side of the slope and trend line. But just as simple as soon as you get home, play 1 or 2 songs that really help you put you in a good mood. Look forward to a dinner, double bonus if you can cook it so that you can control what's happening versus Uber Eats. Look forward to a time to get some oxytocin, that bonding with a partner, a friend, a family member. You have to have a way to shut it off, because it's okay to care and care a lot, but you're finite. That you are all that extra caring and worrying about the future and worry those things, it is neurologically inefficient. And over time, it'll catch up to you, impact your sleep, and then your sleep impacts your decision making. Then your decision making makes you cranky. And now you used to love and care about this, and now you're jaded to everything. Everything sucks. Everyone get away from me. I used to call the people the rain cloud people. They would walk around with a rain cloud over their head, either as a martyr, woe is me, my job is hard, or you guys suck, you guys make me sick. You have to learn how to decompress the energy is my best advice. And that will save you a lot of future stress, and your future person will be very happy that you did.
You've been doing this a long time. You've been coaching folks and kind of seen it all. What are you still trying to figure out?
Why systems fail, ultimately. Why can't humans do well when 1,000 people are trying to do something? I think that there's a math equation in there. So the things that I'm slowly working on a book that kind of talks about some of these processes. One's about the human, the person. So how do you evolve? One's about tribe. You think of corporate America, because I do a lot of coaching there. So those two make a lot of sense to me. It's that third one. What is, I would love to, like, behavioral mathematics. To me, math is discover. I do think there's formulas out there that we need to put together. There is a formula for racism. It's not like this thing just happens, right? In environments. Lack of access to people who don't look like you, groupthink, education levels, depending. And I think if we looked at it more as a mathematical formula, we'd actually find a way to get better at it. We just have to kind of get away from it is all your fault. Now, people have accountability. I am not excusing behavior. Some people suck and they need to be accounted for. But if we really want to, if you really want to change the world and change the systems, you need to understand why it exists. So I think that is just a fun thought project. What is the formula of racism? What's the formula of running a successful company? So those are the things that I work on in between doing the projects. And I think that's why I chose this path is I kind of have this thing here that I can kind of chew on, have great conversations like this, just to get a little bit better understanding of what that looks like.
Michael, I think you've given our listeners a lot to think about today. I'm sure some folks will probably want to reach out and get your support. How can folks find you?
So I'm mostly on LinkedIn. I think that's kind of the easiest way to get a hold of me. I post from time to time about different activities. And I'm always open just to a good conversation. I think most of us are trying to do our part to make the world a better place, especially for those that are even outside the US, because I spend a lot of time outside the US. I'm open for a conversation. I do not have all the answers, but I think a great conversation can help give clarity. And through that clarity, you can find out what works for you.
Thanks for coming on, Michael. This was awesome.
This is great. Thank you for having me. I love the work that you do. This has been a great time.
Awesome. There's 2 episodes of Behavior Speak I think you might want to check out that this conversation really reminds me of. One is episode 142 with Portia James, Creating a Powerhouse, Forging Black Leaders in Behavior Analysis. This is a great one. And then going way back into the vault, back to 2023, episode 76 with Adrian Bradley on the next generation of Black leaders in behavior analysis. 2 episodes I think you'll really enjoy. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok and subscribe to our YouTube page at Behavior Speak. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.